Dr. Corsi. Today we've got a special episode of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. This is ordinarily the show that you and I are offering to our sponsors exclusively, but because we've got basically all of America and the world locked in their homes, we wanted to give everybody a special treat and give everyone access to today's episode. How are you today, Doctor?
I'm good. Looking forward to the presentation today, and just wanting to make sure it shows up here on YouTube and get started. So I'm looking to make sure see if
You
it
know
actually
what?
broadcasts.
Yes, and let me make sure of that as well. There's been so much going on, Dr. Corsi, and my brain is becoming like the scrambled eggs I had for breakfast here. So let me make
Oh,
sure that I get the simulcast going. What you're referring to, of course, is that viewers of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America can watch not only on Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube, but it's going to be simulcast on the Jerome Corsi YouTube channel. And of course, people can see it on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi and patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth. We're both also on Subscribestar, which a lot of people have been having a great experience with. And we're going to be doing some talking about coronavirus today. Of course, it's on everybody's mind. And I think it's appropriate, Dr. Corsi, when we speak about that. Everybody knows you. You've had a career that's spanned decades. You've written literally dozens of books. And I think most people know you're a PhD in political science. You got your degree at Harvard University. But since we will be touching on medical ideas and concepts, I think we should remind people that neither Dr. Corsi nor myself are medical doctors, and nothing that we discuss here is medical advice, simply opinions and commentary on the geopolitical impact of some of these health issues. Right, Doctor?
it is. Although, I mean, I advise, we're going to talk about one of the companies I advise that just come out with a new product that I think is going to be very effective. So I do a lot of work in medical sciences. I understand the medical literature. I can read medical science very easily, and I also understand the experimental method and drugs and viruses. I've done an enormous amount of reading over the years. That doesn't make me medically qualified, but as a consultant, or I'm not a physician. Don't ever intend to be a physician or give medical advice, but I'm conversant enough with what's going on that I can consult in the field, and I continue to do so.
Right. And I think our viewers are going to be surprised to know that you're not utilizing all this spare time while you're sheltered at home to get a medical degree, but that's good to hear, Doctor.
Well, I was never fond of the sight of blood, so I never really wanted to practice medicine.
The other
But
thing we should discuss before we begin, Doctor, your new book, Coup d'etat, which I think you're going to need a second edition of that. It's out now, and people can purchase it on Amazon.com. It's an excellent read. You can get it on Kindle, of course, which is going to deliver it immediately. It's an economical way to get the book. And if people have an Audible subscription like I do, it looks like they can even get it for free.
I narrated the book, so it should be, you hear me narrating it. It's also on CorsiNation.com, the new Corsi Nation, and I'm doing signed copies for people who make donations, and they can purchase it directly in Corsi Nation if you want an autograph or an inscription on the book. And it's, I think it's one of my better books, although hitting at the same time that the coronavirus took hold. Almost, we're back into a news cycle where everything is coronavirus, coronavirus, coronavirus. And just you're showing it, you can see it on the homepage too. There it is on the bookstore, but on the homepage together with Silent No More. And I've just come out with an ebook, which is written with Bishop E.W. Jackson, and it's on the Little Red Book of Communist Socialist Lies. So as you go there, you see the podcast we're doing. There's the books, and the most recent two, and the new ebook on with the cover of Mao there on the Democratic Party. Of course, we've kind of lost track of Joe Biden, and the Democrats have announced
Yeah.
today they're going to hold their convention in Milwaukee in August, a month later.
Hmm.
I mean, it's almost like Joe Biden who. I mean, it's just, the news cycles are Russia, 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 and then it was February. All February was Ukraine, 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 and impeachment. We had an actual impeachment trial in the Senate, historic, only the third in our history. And of course, it's now long forgotten in the virus gate scare that we're going through. And I'm maintaining, while the virus is a very serious virus, that I think it has peaked worldwide, and I don't think it's by any means the last. I have been suspicious from the beginning that this virus would be followed by another, and I think certainly we've got to take seriously the political consequences of the N1 or the H1N1, which was the swine flu when it hit. Obama was in office 2009, and Obama paid a very little attention, but yet it killed something like 29,000 people and infected 15 million in the United States. And we are not at those numbers yet. And I think the virus is actually peaking and will continue to peak. I actually published, I'll get you here the link, because I've been publishing on my Twitter, an article which highlights the fact that Obama was playing golf while
Right.
he didn't, and the mainstream media, of course, loving Obama, did not take. Here is the article. In fact, I'm going to put it up in the instant message for you here in a second here, because this is you can show the actual article of Obama playing golf.
Now, you don't think this is an effective plan for stopping a worldwide pandemic, Dr. Corsi? Perhaps he could get a birdie and all the people would be saved.
Well, his plan was ignore it and it go away. I mean,
Oh, well, that worked well too.
all these viruses do go away. I mean, we have not yet had a virus that killed everybody on the planet, as proved by the fact that we're still here.
Right.
So no virus or no plague or no catastrophe has ever killed everybody. And the point is, I think that all of the viruses we've seen in history have a cycle where they do peak and they go away, even if you do nothing. And Sweden, in fact, is employing that tactic, not wanting to shut down the economy. And the economic consequences of the strategy, which we've taken, which I guess is really, I don't know that President Trump had any real alternative. I think he did the right thing and clearly was wanting to preserve lives. But, the idea of the virus having a peak by forcing everybody to lock down and stay inside, what you're doing only is reducing the contagion factor, which lowers the peak numbers, but it's still going to be basically the same curve shape, modified kind of bell-shaped curve of how a virus typically behaves, where it gains, it peaks, and then it ebbs and goes away. It does so on its own. The virus, there was a book written in 1935 that I've always considered to be one of the best on the subject. It was by Hans Zinzer, and it was called Rats, Lice, and History. And he looked at the virus as writing a biography, as if it were a living creature that makes its way by living on us. It invades our healthy cells in order to feed itself and grow, which always means that a virus has a self-defeating strategy. I mean, that's a very poor strategy to survive, that you've got to eat up and destroy your host. Eventually, it runs out of food, and eventually the virus loses strength. Even in 1918, though the influenza had 3 kind of separate peaks to it, it did eventually go away, and we had no antibiotics and no antiseptics whatsoever. So the key and what's been debated here is just how the shape of this virus peak and curve are going to be. And the models I've been arguing that Dr. Fauci and the White House have been using are these exponential models, which dramatically exaggerate the impact. It's like the climate models were also exponential. The ice caps were going to melt and the seas were going to rise. Well, it didn't happen.
Right.
And I
They
think
don't talk about that, though.
no, and these exponential models are just mathematical fictions. But see, an exponential model is like it's 2 times 2 is 4, so that's your next iteration. And then 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, and 16 times 16 is 256. And within 8 or 10 iterations, you're up to a 12-digit number.
Right.
And it happens very quickly because the rise is very steep rise towards the axis of a graph, whereas a arithmetic rise is 1 plus 1 equals 2 plus 1, the next iteration equals 3. It takes you a long time to get to 1,000,000. Okay, but that's not the way that they're projecting this virus. And I've been citing articles from epidemiologists who I think are correct in saying that the virus is not nearly as severe as it was billed to be and that it's peaking. Here's one, for instance, that a German epidemiologist has written to Merkel, and he's making many of the same points that I'm making. And the points are, there's the article, you can post it, but he's pointing out that, first of all, a lot of the people who are sick and with the virus, who are infected, are not yet really, he distinguishes between those who have the virus, and you have to basically have symptoms in order to be considered ill. So simply to have the virus is not necessarily to be ill from it.
Well,
So
let's
you've
talk
got
about
symptoms.
that for a second, Dr. Corsi, because they've been peppering us with so many every day. This many thousand people have it. This is something that not enough people have been discussing. You talk about something like the zoster virus, which causes chickenpox and shingles. Almost every single person has that virus in their body, but your body, if you don't currently have shingles or chickenpox, has antibodies to prevent it from, thriving inside you, right?
Yes, well, actually, you have to get a shingles shot in order to prevent you from getting shingles
I
because
got shingles.
Did you get shingles?
Oh, it hurts so
Well,
much, Dr. Corsi. I had it in my rib cage and breathing was so painful and it lasted for weeks.
Well, there are a couple of charts which I've been studying on the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control website. Here is one. The CDC has said that there were 23,000 deaths. I'm going to find that first. There were 23,000 deaths from just normal flu this
Oh, yeah.
year. And 15 or 16 million people infected by it. And that's the low number. I think it was actually much higher. When you combine flu with pneumonia, I think it was much higher than that number of deaths. And also the CDC has been not making it clear that the deaths that do occur are mostly from complicating other medical conditions. In other words, something like 78% of the people who go into ICUs, that's the intensive care unit, have either a lung illness or a heart illness, and that's compounded by age, so that you are finding that people who are younger don't typically get critically ill from this virus. And they're not making that clearly distinguished. You have to read their detailed reports to see it. I'll see if I can pull out one of these detailed reports here and show you, but it's, I think, very misleading how they present this data, because it makes it seem like if you get this virus, it's going to kill you. I mean, everybody is so afraid
Right.
of getting it that, in
Well,
fact, that's just not the reality.
right. And I mean, haven't we been totally gaslit by the mainstream news? There was this article in the New York Times with, Dr. Colleen Smith at Elmhurst Hospital. She was saying that it was like an apocalypse. and they did this whole dramatic article where she had video in the ICU or the ER. I've now communicated with Dr. Smith, and she's refused to give me an interview or even answer my questions as far as why she was allowed to publish video from the ICU. I contacted the media department for the hospital yesterday in the morning around 10 a.m. and they insisted that I email the questions. So we're well past 24 hours and there's been no answer from the hospital as to why they wouldn't transport patients from this hospital in Elmhurst, Queens to any of the other nearby hospitals that were not overwhelmed.
Well, and again, you're not going to get an answer. I don't think these are the kinds of questions that are not going to be answered. If you take a look at I think posted you in instant message the article from the New England Journal of Medicine that was published last week. It was March 26th, 2020. And Dr. Fauci, who is the doctor you see on the daily press briefings in the White House, he is from the NIH, and he also holds a position on the board of the CDC. He is a very renowned physician. During the HIV/AIDS crisis, he came up with many of the antiviral remedies that ultimately became established medications. But he's big business, big government, big farm, and a bureaucrat. Now, when he wrote this article, co-authored it in the Journal of the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very prestigious journal. If you look at the second paragraph, he is saying very clearly that the virus is really not much worse than the normal flu, and it's not nearly as bad as it was in the H1N1 incident. So, for instance, the third paragraph, he says, he said if any one of the various studies he's looking at, the number of asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases is several times as high as the number of reported cases, the total fatality from this disease is considerably less than 1%. And in this next sentence, this suggests that the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 may ultimately be more akin to those of a severe seasonal influenza, which had a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%, or a pandemic influenza similar to those in 57 and 68, rather than a disease similar to SARS or MERS, which have a case fatality of 9 and 10 and 36% respectively. Well, okay, so it's not a pandemic influenza. It's not a massive SARS or MERS case. It's basically the flu with a little supercharged attack on the immune system. And it's very treatable for the vast majority of people, unless you are older. And older really means over 85 and have complicating conditions. The people who are going to go on respirators are those who have a lung problem or a heart problem, which means already a weakened or a strained immune system. And then the virus is extremely dangerous. But if you're relatively healthy without those conditions, there's no reason to think this is going to be more severe than the ordinary flu, which even this year is killing, in the low estimate, 23,000 people in a flu season that just ended. You hear nothing about it.
Now, Dr. Corsi, Chad is with us in the comments on YouTube. He's asking if you know, how will it affect infants?
There are a few infants who have died, but they're very unusual cases. Usually the young are more affected by these extreme diseases, but this does not seem to be, it's kind of like the flu. The flu will kill a certain number of young, but very, very few. And the most who die in a normal influenza season are the older and those with complicating conditions, and that's what this flu is. This COVID-19 is doing. I think, quite frankly, the H1N1, if I can pull up the statistics on it, but were much more severe, And yet Obama did nothing to really bring it under control. In fact, didn't even really um, do much to publicize it. The mainstream media went right along with it.
Yeah.
And if I pull up the numbers here, the swine flu epidemic, let's get the CDC numbers on it. Here's the CDC on it, because they're they're going to be considered the authoritative statistics if we want to make these arguments. So let's just use their data.
Our
And
viewers
here
are
I'll put it
bristling
in.
at the CDC, Doctor.
Well, the CDC is a very political organization, and
Yeah.
just like all these government organizations are. But if you look at the article I just gave you, the statistics in this from April 12th, 2009 to April 10th, 2010, the CDC estimated there were 60 million cases.
Wow.
And 274,000 hospitalizations, with 12,649 deaths in the United States due to the H1N1. It affected 151 million people, no, 151,000 people to 575,000. That's the range that died from H1N1 in 2009 to 10. Globally, 80% of the H1N1 virus-related deaths were estimated to have occurred in people younger than 65. Now, in the article where Fauci joins the others in the New England Journal of Medicine, he explains this, in that the older in that instance had been exposed to flus like the H1N1 and had been vaccinated for them. So it was the younger people in the H1N1 who had not been so much vaccinated for these types of flus or types of illnesses, virus-related illnesses, who were more seriously hit. But in a typical influenza season, 70 to 90% of the deaths are estimated to occur to people over 65 years of age. And I would say that the vast majority of deaths in a typical influenza, typical flu, or in this particular flu, the COVID-19, are going to, maybe 80 to 90% of the people who die are going to have had a second condition which weakened them. And you're not hearing that reported in the media. In fact, I think what you're going to begin to see as I watch the numbers, which are really flattening out, that you're going to see all the hospital expansion, the ventilators, the hospital ship that we brought into New York, they're not going to be filled, because the virus and the rate of virus, even in Italy, is slowing down. Now, I want to take a minute to explain that to people in terms of statistics, because everybody would say, well, wait a minute, I mean, that we just doubled the number of deaths in the United States when we went from 2,000 to 4,000 in 3 days. Well, yeah, we did that. But again, it's easy to go from 2,000 to 4,000. But when you get to today, we had 1,000 addition. Okay, now that's, first of all, an indication of a rate slowing. And to go from 4,000 deaths to 5,000 deaths is not doubling. Yeah. We're not at 10,000 deaths. Okay, so people have got to distinguish.
It's certainly not exponential.
It's not exponential. But when you're trying to measure whether the virus is on the up curve, expanding, or peaking, or on the down curve, remember, even on the down curve, the numbers will increase because the virus is still infecting somebody, and that's an additional number with morbidity or mortality. But the rate, you've got to look at the rate. How many additional new cases? It's like if you did differential calculus, you're looking at the delta, the increase from one interval to the next interval, which you can measure the shape of the curve and just whether it's peaking, how fast it's accelerating. You've got to look at the deltas to know the rate And that's the important metric when you're trying to evaluate a virus as to whether it's peaking or whether or not it's still expanding and growing. But most
Yeah.
people don't do those distinctions. And I was noticed on article on that was very much noticed today on Zero Hedge that even in Italy, you see that the virus has peaked. And I've been daily watching the Italian news on the internet. They have RAI, which is the RAI, the national television network of Italy, and one of the RAI 24 has broadcasts news all the time, 24 hours a day, and they're running out of the COVID-19 stories to play because they don't have the new cases to go out and the people packing in. They're just it has actually leveled off. And I'm trying to find that article to post it for you, but it was pretty startling to me that you are already, as I was talking about, that we would see that the virus has already begun to show signs of peaking worldwide. And yet, Dr. Fauci is saying that we're not going to end this lockdown until nobody is getting sick. Well, I mean that's that'll be
I mean, that's
that could be a
crazy.
year from now.
Right. He wants it to be
It,
locked down, Dr. Corsi, doesn't he? I mean, isn't it true that Fauci is basically like a neo-Marxist, globalist kind of guy who wants to destroy the economy, keep everybody in their house? There's a lot of people in our comments, Dr. Corsi, who are very concerned about the notion that the lockdown is motivated by something other than the virus. A lot of people are talking about 5G and various things. We've heard today that President Trump is sending naval warships to Venezuela, that he's speaking with Vladimir Putin about trying to broker a deal between Russia and OPEC. Seems to be a real lot of activity going on the international stage. To what extent do you think that the lockdown is related to possibly something other than the virus that we aren't being told?
well, I think a lot of the concern of the virus is that I said from the beginning in analyzing a few of the one science article in particular that came out of India, where they were looking at the sequencing of the virus. You sequence the chemical structure of a virus and look at its makeup, and they were arguing that the splicing of sequences that attack the immune system do not occur in nature. And I think there's increasing concern that this virus was created in a laboratory. Now, the other concerns are certainly when you look at the actions of Putin and Russia, where Russia is going through, I've been doing these interviews with this Boris, who is a source. Yeah, and Boris is not working for a government, but his main contention is to be concerned about, he's very concerned about Putin wanting to use this opportunity to destroy the United States economically or to certainly weaken it, and looking at the fact that Putin has simultaneously launched an attack on our oil market by pulling out of the agreement with Saudi Arabia, which had limited the production of oil by OPEC and Russia in order to increase the price. With the United States at $50 a barrel, our fracking and hydraulic drilling, we're really leading the world in oil production right now. But at under that price, under $50 a barrel, our industry is hard to maintain production at that level. And so it looks like a coordinated attack with Putin taking advantage of the virus in order to can create a condition of weakening the United States economically with a simultaneous attack on oil and our national security being a leading producer of oil. Now, I mean, I think there's an easy solution to if Putin's just, let's redirect some of the nuclear arsenal of Putin and say, look, if you're playing this game, stop. Because you want to play end of the world games. I think Donald Trump would say, don't play them with me. And
Well,
I
we're
think
hearing
Putin.
That
Putin will
Trump is
understand
now,
that language.
yeah, Trump is apparently brokering a deal between Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Putin to cut Russian oil production. Are you confident that that's going to happen?
Well, I think the first of all, I think Solomon will be on our side and not view Putin as an ally. And I think it's important for President Trump to establish that. You'll remember a couple of years ago when that investigative journalist was killed in Saudi Arabia. Khashoggi, I believe his name
Oh,
was, and
Jamal Khashoggi.
yeah, and that was, I think, an attempt to get Trump to turn on Saudi Arabia. And Trump, evidently, the incident was actually filmed. It was a gruesome incident, and operatives were involved in hijacking him and killing him. And Trump did not turn on Solomon. He basically refused to do so. He wouldn't be baited into that. So I think Trump is Putin. I don't think he can trust Putin. Period. He is KGB. He is a brilliant tactician. If you look at his past, he's ruthless. I think Boris was right. He started the Second Chechnyan War to gain power. He had killed his mentor, who was the mayor of St. Petersburg when he first came out of the KGB and was working in politics. He laundered money for Gorbachev and for Putin. This guy is a operative, and I think there's pretty good evidence that he had bankrolled Soros to short the pound. And when he did so, I think there's a coordinated group that has been shorting the dollar. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Putin involved in that to try to bring down the stock market.
Well, now wait a
I mean,
minute. Who is that group who's shorting the dollar? Because that seems very important.
Well, I've been writing about that and broadcasting about that in my podcast because you can do a coordinated, you get a group of say 24, and that's what Boris has alerted us to. And I think 24 is a large number of kind of independent market makers around the world who are willing to place simultaneous and coordinated big bets pushing stocks down. When you short a stock, you sell something you don't own, anticipating that you'll be able to buy it at a lower price than you have to sell it.
Right.
In other words, I short a stock today that's listed for $10, and I anticipate because I put downward pressure on that stock, I can buy it at $5 and then sell it at the $8 or whatever the contract was for and make the $3 difference as pure profit. And it's best to short the market in a coordinated fashion. In fact, I think after we begin reporting this, the SEC is starting to take a look at it. And the SEC should be able to determine pretty quickly whether, what the pattern of downward trading is. Now, Donald Trump has activated the Fed. I think the Fed is actually going into the stock market and buying stocks, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, not so good. Before we get too far from this point, Dr. Corsi, isn't it correct that Jamal Khashoggi is not actually an investigative journalist, but a jihadi and probably involved in a coup attempt in Saudi Arabia?
It's likely. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It's likely. And I think that the reality is you're seeing the incident was manufactured or created and publicized and I think filmed, although the killing was pretty gruesome. I think he was dismembered and they fed the body parts, whatever they did, so the body parts were gone. And it was gruesome. And Trump did not turn against Salman.
He shrugged, as I recalled when he was asked about it. It was also pretty unique because there was this situation where they had like a body double leaving wearing his clothing, which is quite curious.
Yeah, the whole incident. Here's the article from November 20th, 2018, where Trump actually is able. Here he's reconciling. The article says Trump stays with Saudi Arabia despite the Khashoggi murder. That's right here, and there's a picture of Trump with Khashoggi after the murder, and he basically said that Trump
And
said that
Salman. He's not hanging with
it,
Khashoggi after the murder.
no, I'm sorry, with Salman,
Yeah.
I was going too fast, and said that he basically Trump's going to stand with Saudi Arabia regardless of whether Salman ordered the murder of Khashoggi. And the backstory here is that the Saudis are central to Trump's Middle Eastern strategy, and he doesn't want to upset the alliance and the working with the Saudis. And I think that there's good sense to that. I mean, I understand exactly what he's doing, and basically, I think that this is all I'm very suspicious of what Putin is doing too, and I think Trump has got to hear from Putin directly that he, commit him to working with us and not against us in this virus crisis.
Yeah.
And I think the issues here have to be addressed very clearly. But the conspiracy theories and all the speculation about this, I think first we've got to deal with the virus, and I'm encouraging Trump to establish a dialogue with Putin, to speak with him in words of one syllable, to say, you want to go down this route of, World War III, don't think that I won't go down that route. And if you want to use this as an opportunity to weaken the United States, you picked the wrong president to do it under. You should have done it with Obama, who made points about how he was going to be able to be more compromising after he won his second election.
Now, Dr. Corsi, we're hearing some news that one of these Russian Antonov, 124, this is like the biggest cargo jet ever. I think it has 6 engines and 48 wheels, and it's just a giant thing. I'm trying to find a picture of it, but it's just left for the United States, loaded with medical aid equipment to help with the coronavirus. A lot of people in the comments are remarking that, Trump, and even before Trump, the United States almost inexplicable alliance to Saudi Arabia is tied to the petrodollar. And it seems that a lot of this is wrapped up in that.
Well, the point is that the petrodollar, which is the United States dollar, is still the major currency for international trade, period. And especially oil has always looked at the petrodollar being, one of the strong supports of the U.S. dollar. But the point is, I think if you look at the geopolitics of this, the Saudis have also sided with Egypt to support Israel against Iran. That's a major calculation. The Putin getting out of the agreement with the Saudis in terms of, not wanting the price of oil to lower. Russia saying we're going to produce more, we're going to lower the price of oil, getting out of that agreement to restrict production. I think the Saudis are going to be key in talking Putin back into some sanity, because Putin also cuts his own revenue by that strategy, because less revenue for the oil he's selling, a lower price, means less revenue, foreign exchange currency for Putin. The point is, I think that the virus as a disease has been hyped by the mainstream media for whatever political reason. I mean, we got this mainstream media megaphone right now, so when they decide they're going to broadcast an issue, whether it's Russiagate or Ukraine and impeachment or the virus, that's all you can talk about. And I think that's very dangerous. I think that's not a free press, and that's not healthy in terms of people can't even remember last month what the impeachment was about in Ukraine. Now we're all worried about the corona. What are we going to be worried about next month? And this kind of manipulation of the public's attention and the manipulation of the news by the mainstream media, which has an agenda which is anti-Trump, is not healthy. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to say stand tall in this podcast is that Trump has not only, I think, stood up to Russia and begun telling Russia either you help us here, Putin, or don't take aggressive steps against us, or I'm pointing the nuclear arsenal right at you and at China. And I'd like you both to behave right now. I mean, I think that's the one syllable that these guys are going to understand, unfortunately.
There's something
And
more I
I
wanted
think,
to add to what you're saying,
and
Dr. Corsi.
secondly, put the troops on the border and say, drug cartels, here's the military now,
Right,
and we're not messing around with the border anymore.
right.
Okay, and so Trump has really taken some very, very hard and decisive actions. And by the way, if we need $2 trillion or we need $4 trillion, we're going to get through this crisis. But I'm saying that we've got to think seriously before we knee jerk into these lockdowns based
Yeah.
upon a virus that looks to me like it's going to peak and never was all that serious to begin with.
Well, and I think to your comments about manipulating people's attention and whatnot, it's not just that. People are being manipulated from a psychological standpoint. I know a lot of people who are very fearful, and people who I've known my whole entire life who are, I mean, I think they're acting irrationally. What do you think about this picture of Chris Cuomo, who allegedly has this incredibly dangerous virus? He looks totally okay to me.
Well, I've known a dozen people who are not terribly sick on this virus, and some of my very good friends in New York had the virus and found out they had it, were shocked they had it, and they're not very sick from it. I also want to emphasize another thing, and this is I want to go to this Blue Willow Biologics announcement today, and just in full disclosure, this is a company I do consult with. They just announced today that they have they are a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company, and they're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They have developed vaccines for diseases like anthrax, which are now in advanced clinical stage testing. This is a product that is a nasal swab. As you read it here, you say a nasal antiseptic solution that reduces germs that could cause infections. And it's going to be available for purchase over the counter by hospitals, businesses, and customers. I want to read the second paragraph just so I want to get this exactly correct. The nanobio product, which is what they call it, it's nanotechnology. It's got nanotechnology engines in it that are able to pierce a virus or germs and kill them in the nose before they get into your system.
Wow.
And you do see that anything that comes into the mucous membrane, in fact, is probably going to be a more effective vaccine. And Blue Willows is working on a vaccine for the coronaviruses. They're actually looking at COVID-19. This is not it is not tested against COVID-19. But when you read it, the nanobio product is alcohol-free. It's a nasal antiseptic that is 99% kills 99% of germs as shown in lab tests. The product is applied by thoroughly swabbing the skin inside of each nostril and is recommended to help reduce germs on the skin that can cause infection. This nanobio product is non-irritating. It's fragrance-free. It leaves no residue upon application. It should be used in conjunction with frequent hand washing, limited touching of the face, social distancing to minimize infection. And there's a quote here from a Dr. Coronado, who's a fellow at the Infectious Disease Society of America and the former vice president of regulatory and affairs and vice president of clinical research at Johnson & Johnson. And he says, during this difficult time, doctors and nurses who are treating patients need every protective measure possible. Even though Blue Willow's nasal antiseptic, the swabs haven't been clinically tested to confirm protection against COVID-19 infection. It's demonstrated both antibacterial and antiviral activity in laboratory tests, making it a potentially important additive measure to hand washing and barrier techniques for healthcare workers on the front lines. So what this does, what this Nano Protect does is you swab your nose for about 4 hours. The nanoparticles get into your mucous membrane and will work to attack any germs, viruses, or bacteria that get into your nose. And if you're a healthcare worker, probably have to swab it, every 4 hours. But again, like wearing face masks or getting the protective gear, this is yet one more protective product that can help you from getting disease while you're trying to treat those who are sick. And since it's going to be over the counter, even sold on Amazon, I think the product is going to become like the Purell, the hand sanitizer for the nose.
Some people like
And
that. They have that Flonase and all that stuff.
Yes. I mean, I think it's, again, a product that what I'm seeing, and I believe we're going to continue to see, is that now the COVID-19 has increased the awareness of the public of the potential for an epidemic. My definition of a serious epidemic is you get it that day and you die that day. Anthrax and some of the others have that potential. And that would be that's now, the kind of disease that hit in the Middle Ages in the Black Plague. And yet not everybody died. And the virus did go away. Yes.
And you said earlier that you were expecting another possible outbreak of something. I wanted to ask you about that because I was listening to, perhaps it was Mike Adams this morning, was interviewing Nyquist, I think the guy's name was, and he was saying, he was sort of an expert in biological warfare and talking about strategic tactics that might be employed if it were a biological weapon, that there's a first wave that's intended to overwhelm the hospitals and then a bigger wave that will be launched later when there's no hospital capacity or when the medical workers are sufficiently contaminated. Is that what you meant when you said another wave?
Well, or to test what the response would be and to see how the particular country would react. So, this is not, I was looking at reading the medical science and COVID-19 from the very beginning. And I'm saying again that I am not, qualified here as a medical doctor. But what I'm seeing here is that this is a bad flu. And it's the nature of the SARS attack and the HIV attack. We've got medicines that have for many years been working in these situations. And when we found even that this hydroxychloroquine works, this is not, this virus, I think, has solutions to it that you can apply. And I worked with Dr. Graves and have done videos with Dr. Graves. I'm going to do another one even after this, Jason, another video with Dr. Graves tonight.
Wow.
And she was instrumental. Well, I've been doing up to 3 podcasts a day.
It's rough, Dr. Corsi.
Just trying to get this word out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not up to your level yet. But, I'm trying to get the word out on this. And I think if you listen to me, my themes have been consistent. We don't need to know that it was a laboratory-produced bioattack in order to, let's assume it was, in order to be very prepared if that were the case. Okay, in any event, just look at the sequence of, we've had, SARS, we've had MERS, we've had one after the other, swine flu, bird flu, we've had Ebola. I mean, we are getting a series of potential epidemic and pandemic illnesses hitting the.
You said series in the phone.
It said series and the phone kicks in. Yeah, well, that's okay. I got to take that off the phone. It's so irritating. Okay, so I said series and it picked up. I probably will again. Just did again. So you can't say that. Okay, so look,
a bunch of things. Yeah,
I think we would be well advised to take this one extremely seriously. And I think the long-term impact of this is potentially more. I agree with Donald Trump that we don't want the cure, the lockdown, to be more serious and more damaging to the United States than the virus itself. And that's, I think, this mainstream media hype, anticipating that Trump would look bad in handling the virus and be blamed for it. The logic of the left sometimes defies me, or the hate Trump group.
Right.
I think has backfired because Trump has taken a hold of this, has gotten people money to relieve, but with 6 million people on unemployment, the numbers are startling. We're beginning to have produced a country that's back to Depression era. Now, I think it's going to return quickly once we switch it on again. And I'm not sure we won't be better off, especially with the increased awareness of, antiseptics and the like, and the need to get new medicines into the mix. They're coming on fast. They're being produced worldwide. I think this Blue Willow will be one of the contenders for some very serious medications in the future. Clearly, what they've done with the nasal vaccines as opposed to the intermuscular vaccines just intuitively appear to me to have a much better chance of handling respiratory illnesses like the SARS or the MERS, because when we get the normal flu vaccine, which is intermuscular, it's only effective about half of the time, while a lot of people don't even bother, even when they get the strain of the flu for that year right.
Yeah.
Because intermuscular vaccines for respiratory diseases, I don't think are going to be nearly as effective as getting it into the nose, where the vaccine or the medicines go right into the mucous membrane and immediately start impacting the immune system. The immune system is an intelligent system. It learns, it adapts. And I think as such, it is a very adaptive system that will, over time, learn how to handle these diseases. I think they can be handled, but I do worry that one could be produced either by nature or weaponized. And I think we should not be having these biolabs playing with viruses. We have extreme capabilities today of sequencing and understanding viruses. In the first hours this virus occurred, and China lied about it, they minimized it. But by the middle of January, I was reading articles in scientific journals that had the complete sequencing of this virus. Well, that was remarkable to me. 20 years ago, that was not possible. And once you got the sequence of the virus, you could start deciding which of the various strategies to develop vaccines had the highest potential to work. And there are about 6 or 7 different strategies right now in progress to do clinical trials. And Trump has even accelerated these processes. But the government bureaucracy does stand in the way. And the middle tier of distributors for the big farm makes the prices, skews everything so that Fauci fights hydrochloroquine because it only costs pennies and should be readily available, when he's, saying, oh, just wait a year and we'll have a real vaccine for that. Well, that's fine. And he'll probably retire to one of the big pharmaceutical companies in his heydays. Foundation.
Yeah.
Or the Bill Gates Foundation. But, that's good for him. But in the meantime, let's get bureaucracy out of the way, and let's open the ability to get some of these cures in the hands of people sooner without having to go through all these hoops to say, well, nothing was tested for COVID-19 because it didn't exist 6 months ago.
Well,
so how could anything have been?
Yeah.
How could anything have gone through, the NIH and the FDA and all the other protocols in order to get a clinical test done? At minimum, it's going to take 7 to 10 months or a year to get that done. And if that's the requirement to roll anything out, and Fauci standing in the way of saying, oh, you've got to go to a hospital to get hydroxychloroquine, let the doctors distribute it. Let the doctors make the decisions on the medications.
Why not just a
All
pharmacy?
Fauci is doing is let a doctor do it, because it is it is a drug that needs to be prescribed. It's common. It's taken for malaria, but if it's not taken correctly, or there are certain conditions where people probably shouldn't take it, the maybe certain heart conditions or certain, there are many, but they're limited. Let a physician prescribe it, but don't send the sick to the hospital or the potentially sick to get hydroxychloroquine when it could be prescribed by the doctors. And all you're doing is, flooding the hospitals with more people that don't need to be there, and potentially bringing more illness into the hospital than needs to arrive.
Yeah.
And again,
Dr. Corsi,
that's the political structure of medicine, which I oppose in terms of favoring big farm, when in fact what we need today is to cure people.
yeah, a lot of our viewers are very opposed to the concept of a vaccine. I'm a little bit concerned with, how aggressively and how early on they were talking about that. We'll have to see how that goes. I want to redirect you just in the last few minutes that we have here, because there's a recent development that people are very confused by and concerned about. What do we know about the United States sending warships to the Caribbean to fight the drug cartels? It seems like very odd timing, and we see these globalist dopes wearing masks, I guess at the EU or something. I mean, this just looks ridiculous. And some of our viewers are saying that all of these people wearing masks all the time, it presents a security concern. I agree with that. What's going on with sending these warships to Venezuela or to the South America there in the middle of this coronavirus outbreak?
Well, I don't know I'm not privy to any of the particular military plans. What I've observed certainly yesterday in the president's coronavirus press conference, he started it by bringing out the military and by bringing out the Department of Homeland Security and saying, we're going to secure the border with military if that's what it takes. Okay, now in that process, this is the I think the future of getting serious about dealing with the real nature of immigration and across our borders, which I think now is a more serious issue than we've ever seen because of the virus. And what you're dealing with is a porous border was in fact has always been a security threat. And with President Trump saying, look, we're going to secure the border and make sure that it's secured even with the military. I mean, again, I think this is another innovation. And I think we need to also, I've also been consulting with TerraBlock. I made that clear, which is a kind of solution we use to secure forward deployment in combat zones. It's this very flexible system that can secure the whole border. It's not a 35-foot steel wall, which are the current specifications the Army Corps is requiring. I think we could adjust some of those and maybe get some kind of barrier on the border today. But one of the points is when Trump has gotten Mexico involved and changed the asylum laws so people can't ultimately get here, and the catch and release laws are changed, we're not having the border flooded with families. So we've taken away a lot of the corrupt criminal activity that complicated the border situation, so that the families and the coyotes and everybody that wants to create a caravan type approach to swamp the borders. Well, once that's not hitting the borders, the Border Patrol and the military are a lot better to focus on the drug cartels. And that's what they're doing. So I think they're taking the opportunity that we've lowered the general flood across the border significantly. And now with the virus, we've got an additional reason to take a serious look at border security, and the military is going to be involved. Yeah. And I think and the military ought to bring with them their TerraBlock solution, which I think will help border security and help everything along the way.
And they can certainly enjoy this awesome video of a truck crashing into it.
Right. I mean, it will work, but it's, so it doesn't meet Army Corps specifications today for the 35-foot steel barrier. Right. Okay. Go back to those once we have, but now use the solution that works today. and then you can redeploy the terror block wherever you want it, just like change the FDA requirements for clinical testing today in order to break those barriers and in order to make sure we have a method of, getting the job done now. And I think that's what the American people want. I want the job also. Let's get the American people back to work now. And let's not prolong it with I call him Dr. Faustus, Dr. Fauci, saying we have to wait until nobody's getting sick at all, or we've got this curve and there's going to be 200,000 deaths. I don't see it, except that the government, bureaucracy, medicine, big farm sees an economic opportunity in scaring everybody. And certainly, even Trump mentioned yesterday the two things I've commented about Fauci. Number one is, I don't know whether he or Bloomberg or Putin are actually the shortest of the three. I'm not sure. Trump said he actually won a basketball game one time and marveled that he didn't look like he could play basketball. And secondly, Trump said he sure likes that microphone, Dr. Faustus does. Yeah. And he does. He grabs that microphone and he's there and he's in control and this is the highlight of his life. Well, I'm sorry, he's a bureaucrat. And that makes me worry that he is in the mode of accelerating a crisis to promote his own personal ambition. Yes, and I don't think it's appropriate at this time.
No, definitely not. He's a little bit short to be a baller, Dr. Corsi. But we're hearing from the comments here that this Navy captain who had been pleading for help after a coronavirus outbreak on the carrier has been fired, PBS is reporting.
I don't know if that's the case. I think he was air-vac'd out of the carrier, I heard. That's news that he was fired. I haven't heard that. I mean, the truth is military encampments since the days of Caesar have been breeding grounds for disease. In the Civil War, it was endemic with, serious diseases. World War I, it was still endemic. And an aircraft carrier is going to breed diseases. Now, a flu going through an aircraft carrier is, again, no big deal, and it doesn't get reported on the front page of the paper.
Right.
COVID going through a crew, because of the scare of COVID-19, the heightened frightenness about this becomes a big news story.
Yeah.
And I'm saying basically that I think we got to put this back into perspective. The military yesterday said, look, the job of the military is to defend the country, and we are by nature in closed quarters, always. In combat, we're in closed, and training, in ships and planes, and we're going to stay in closed quarters. We're not going to social distance in the military because it would defeat our mission. Right. And I think that's appropriate. And again, it's one of the, I think the military, our first responders. That's why I'm so enthusiastic to get this drug, to get this nasal swab out in the market, because I think we've got to do everything we can for the first responders, the military, the police, the medical personnel who are putting themselves at risk in order to protect the public. I mean, this is in the category of, no greater sacrifice. Yeah. And I think this is heroic, especially at the times when the public is so tremendously frightened of this disease and concerned about it.
Yeah. And just in our last moments here, Dr. Corsi, because I know you've got limited time, you've got another interview to do, but we've got a question here. Where did it go? We were being asked if Dr. Fauci, yes, Jojo Graz is asking if Fauci is an Obama leftover. Charles did quite a bit on Dr. Fauci on Sunday. I think he's been embedded in the Global Fund for quite a while.
Well, Fauci, look, if I were going to do a deep dive into Fauci and start looking into his investments and his income and his positions and all the rest of it, I think I've got a pretty good idea what I'd find. I don't think this is someone who has sacrificed his life to medicine in any way that hasn't benefited him. He's a very famous doctor. I'm sure he's got patents and lots of other issues that are benefiting him. And it's just obvious to me he likes the limelight, the spotlight. But the point I'm saying is that Trump right now is in a politically dangerous situation if he doesn't show the public that he can't fire Fauci, because that would be an immediate incident upon which the mainstream media would just double up on him.
Yeah.
And it's not the time to do that.
No.
But Trump has made it clear, for instance, when he said he was going to go forward with this hydrochloroquine, that he in fact was going to go forward with it. And he basically didn't have Fauci at that press conference. So I think Trump is astute and attuned with what's happening. But, let's give him a break here. He's under big time political pressure. And I think Trump is doing an amazing job with all these pressures upon him, that he is staying calm and he's being effective. And his popularity is showing. The public is responding.
Mm-hmm. And people are reminding us that Fauci is a Clinton guy. Of course, he was in those, I think this was John Podesta, or he was in some WikiLeaks emailing like Cheryl Mills or something about how amazing Hillary Clinton was. Well, Dr. Corsi, we're going to have to follow up next week. Hopefully things will be improving and on the way back to normal. I want to thank everybody for watching us tonight and remind everybody to visit CorsiNation.com. You can keep abreast of the doctor's podcasts, the various videos that he's doing, the news posts, and of course you can order his books. The latest book is Coup d'etat. You can also get Silent No More and the Little Red Book of Democrat Socialist Lies. This is perhaps more important than ever as we are being forcibly transitioned to socialism. I hope people will keep capitalism and the economy and this show alive by becoming sponsors. You can watch Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America every week. It's normally a sponsor-exclusive show. I want to thank the hundreds of people that are joining us on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, Crowdsource the Truth Too, and of course, Dr. Corsi's YouTube channel at Jerome Corsi. And people can join us on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth, or the subscribe to our channels for either of us. We'll be back next week. Dr. Corsi, stay well, and I will speak to you next week.
Jason, always a great pleasure. Thank you. And in the end, God always wins. God bless the audience. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Corsi, and thanks everyone for watching. Have a great night.